Greetings, viewer. It is I, Hilariously Scary, bringing you the lost episode of the, Hilariously Scary Multiverse? The HSU. Yes, the lost episode of the HSU. So last year, I started working on this project for a series I wanted to do called Scrap Storylines, where basically I would take stories that I had at one point in time that I scrapped for one reason or another, and I would go through and explain the story and kind of present it in an animatic form. So I wrote up the script for a scrapped story I called Aftermath and got to work on the animatic, and I got like half of the way through, but the thing is, a 20-page script is really long to animatic all. A year has passed and it's still not done, and I haven't touched it in months. So I figure I'd go ahead and show y'all what I did get done, you know, kind of half do the idea, and for what I didn't get done, I have this handy dandy little speed paint of the main character. Her name is Alpha. She will eat your entire family, and I do love her. So without further ado, let's jump into the story. I'm just straight up reading whatever I wrote for this like a year ago. So the year's 20XX and a brand new technology was just developed: virtual dreaming. Basically, it's like virtual reality, but instead of crafting a world in front of you and trying to trick your senses, it crafts a dreamscape that matches whatever is programmed in the game. And the best part about it is, time moves faster in a dream than in reality. So in theory, you could play a game until you're completely bored of it, and in reality, it would only have been a few hours. And it wouldn't be precious hours during the day when you need to get work done. It would be during your regular sleeping time. It's the quintessential gaming system for the average working American. Another impressive thing about this technology is that it can connect to the web, so you can play with other people online while dreaming. On the launch day, one of the many MMORPGs that was developed for this technology was a game called Zombie Plus. This was not your average zombie game. It was an intense, highly realistic simulation of an actual zombie apocalypse. It was made to be a long-lasting experience, with each hour of the night being 1 year in game time. This was for hardcore zombie fans, the kind that actually wish the world was going through a zombie apocalypse. It was also all online, so all the players would be interacting with real people. Unfortunately, or given how it turned out perhaps fortunately, the game was only released in America. This is just an SAO ripoff. Don't sue me! The plan was for every night at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the cycle would begin. Everyone would log on and eagerly await the zombies. The zombies were the brain-eating type. They're physically strong but had no brains of their own. Their skin was a sickly pale purple and their hair was a bitter white. At 6 a.m., after 8 in-game years, the cure would be found, and the surviving players would be rewarded greatly with in-game benefits and bragging rights. However, if your avatar was caught by one of these zombies, their brains would be eaten. Your avatar would turn into a zombie, complete with their skin and hair changing to match the zombies, and you'd have to start all over with a new character the next night. You could also log out at any time, and your avatar would simply become a zombie. Or at least, that was the plan. On the launch day, hundreds of thousands of players joined. Gosh darn. Okay. Hundreds of thousands of people joined the first ever round of Zombie Plus, ready for the zombie apocalypse of their life. Those hesitant about the 8 years were comforted by the ability to quit the game and wake up at any moment. There was even a feature where you could play offline on a watered down version of the game, where you could set the time rate to whatever you wanted for those who died early but still wanted to play. However, no one who went online that fateful day would ever get the chance to play the offline version. You see, shortly after the first round began, players noticed that the logout feature was broken. Thousands of players reported the issue, sending the programmers in a scramble trying to figure out the glitch that caused this major mistake. Because of this glitch, the cycle also wouldn't end at 6 a.m. as it required input from the programmers, so the game simply continued. They finally managed to find the problem, but by the time they were able to fix it and apply it to the game, it had been a solid 48 hours. By this time, everyone in the game had been taken to hospitals to monitor their vitals and keep them alive. After all, no one had stayed asleep for so long without being able to properly go through all the sleep cycles before. When everyone woke up, things went sour quickly. In one hospital, a woman, after waking up, immediately attacked a young girl. She was screaming in the 16-year-old face, saying that the girl was a monster who ate the woman's children. Before the woman could cause any major harm, a large man tackled her and ripped her off the girl. He stood in between the two, saying that he would protect Her Majesty no matter the cost. He then attacked the woman and nearly killed her. They were both restrained. Similar cases were occurring around the country, confirming the reports of the people who had gotten out earlier due to dying in the game. So here's what happened in the 48 years that the game took place. It started out just as advertised, a typical zombie apocalypse. People fought off the first wave of zombies, many people dying, not realizing that they were truly the lucky ones. It took a few years, but the players got a handle on the game, and the tide quickly turned in the humans' favor. The players worked together to build strongholds, and soon the zombies were barely even an obstacle. It was just like it was in the beta test. Little did anyone know, they had barely scratched the surface of the game. Everything changed when a user named Bia showed up. She seemed to come out of the blue, killing hundreds of players in an instant. She had a user tag like any other player, but the white hair of a zombie. She ate brains like a zombie, and clearly had a brain since her attacks were so well planned and executed. And she didn't have the pale purple skin that was so identifiable of zombies. No, her skin was a dark purple and speckled with yellow diamonds. She was a zombie plus. Roll game credits. These zombie plus had the smarts of a human and the physical abilities of zombies. They were also near unkillable. In fact, it took several years for humans to even figure out how to kill them. Bia was the first zombie plus. She was able to turn the other humans into zombie plus, and once she did, they were completely loyal to her. Their skin would turn the same dark purple and their hair would turn the same silvery white, but most importantly, they bore the same yellow, I think I actually made it yellow, what are they called? Hexagons? Whatever, yellow thingies as the queen. In fact, Bia actually went by Queen Bia. In the whole 48 years, there were only ever 4 original Zombie Plus. There are hundreds of Zombie Plus by the end of the game, but they were all loyal to the same 4. Bia reigned for 6 years before finally being killed. Before that, players did everything they could think of to kill Zombie Plus. Blowing their brains out, which worked for the regular zombies, cutting off their heads, stabbing them in their hearts, etc. Eventually, they figured out that Bia had a hard core in the center of their body. The day they carved out Queen Bia's core was the greatest victory for player kind. By this time, it had been about 10 in-game years, and more people had fallen to Zombie Plus than actual zombies. Now that Queen Bee was gone, they had nothing to worry about. Save the terror of not being able to actually log out. Well, until now, there has only ever been one Zombie Plus. The players thought she was a special case, a programmed enemy for them to defeat, but shortly after she died, this one had the same white hair as zombies, the same dark purple skin as Bia's Zombie Plus, but in the place of the diamonds were green circles, and her name? Alpha. Alpha was much more careful than Queen Bia. Now that the number of players had whittled down significantly, she had to be careful. She would take her group of Zombie Plus to a human stronghold, pose as one of Alpha's negotiator, so they wouldn't even bother trying to attack her, and strike a deal. Either they could kill everyone in the stronghold, and they absolutely could, or they could hand out over 5 of their couples. See, in game, there's a feature to have children. The children would be NPCs that could basically be used as cannon fodder, or in this case, Zombie Plus food. Alpha essentially made human farms, making the captured villages breed so that she could eat the children's brains. Listen, I said it was scrapped for a reason. This worked for about a decade. The Zombie Plus lived in quasi-peace with the humans, and most of the regular zombies had long been killed off. Most humans did not want to willingly become Zombie Plus either, since that would essentially mean giving up their free will to Alpha. Some did try, but Alpha was more likely to put them in her human farm than risk losing food to become another mouth to feed. Technically, Zombie Plus didn't need to eat brains to survive. Brains were like energy, so the more they ate, the better they felt. If you didn't eat any brains, you would move more slowly and be very weak. If you ate a lot of brains, you could do practically anything. So most of the brains went to Her Majesty Alpha. Anyways, life is good. Or at least as good as it could when you're trapped in a zombie apocalypse game. That was until many humans began to complain about a breach of contract. Alpha had agreed that her Zombie Plus would not attack them if they gave up their 5 couples, but they were suddenly being attacked again. When asked to describe their attackers, they told her that the men had the same purple skin and white hair, however the marking was different. Their skin was marked with orange triangles. Alpha knew there was a new original Zombie Plus in town. She followed one of these Zombie Plus to their leader, deciding to confront the newbie. Sure enough, the zombie led her straight to the Sure enough, the Zombie Plus led her straight to his master, an arrogant player with a god complex who called himself Master. He was also the first male original Zombie Plus, but he had the same effects as Beta and Alpha. He had turned a couple humans into Zombie Plus and had eaten a large number of humans. Alpha lectured him about the rules she had set in place that benefited both humans and Zombie Plus. Master originally ignored her because of his very obvious god complex, but after being berated several times for his actions, he eventually struck up a deal. "Listen, sweetheart." He talked in a British accent, by the way. "Let's make a deal. I'll have my men follow your precious little rules, and in return, you will be my wife." Alpha was originally repulsed by the idea, but then she began to think it over. An alliance between the two would strengthen Zombie Plus kind, and in-game marriages were quite common at this point, so it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. She agreed to the marriage, and the two were wed. It was the classics, starting off hating each other and then falling deep in love. Over the next 28 years, the two were inseparable. They trusted each other fully and were unstoppable. About year 32, they broke the deal with the humans and enslaved all humankind. They spent the last 16 years enjoying their time together as the supreme leaders of the whole world. And before you say, "But hilariously scary," oh my gosh, nobody's saying this, but hilariously scary, there are only 3 original zombies. Where's the last one? I'm getting there. Basically around year 16, another original Zombie Plus was created. His thing was blue stripes, by the way, but he was a timid boy and hated the idea of killing people. He refused to kill anyone, thus becoming weaker and weaker until he was stuck in a cave, barely able to even move. He slept for years, never turning a single human. Eventually, Alpha and Master found him and took him in as their pseudo-son. He still acted young, having slept through most of the 20 years he was inactive. With time and a lot of brains, he became just as powerful as Alpha and Master, being known as Prince from his position. But finally, after 48 years of this madness, all the players awoke. The humans who had spent 30 years creating children for the Zombie Plus to feast on, and the Zombie Plus who had spent 30 years eating human brains, devoutly loyal to, I don't know what that word is, super loyal to Alpha and Master, and the original Zombie Plus who had spent 30 years living as imperial beings with absolute control. And the world realized that this zombie apocalypse game, with the added difficulty of a few superpowered zombies, had been transformed into a living hell that people spent half a lifetime trapped in. The hospital where the woman attacked a girl only to be fought off by a grown man makes a little bit more sense now, doesn't it? Anyways, now that we got the background I'm gonna tell you about the story. That's right, that was the background. Okay, saying that sounds like I've got something amazing planned, but it's just, we've already seen all of that done. We've already seen Trapped in the game. We've already seen the anti-heroes rising to power. We've seen the struggle to survive in a game. We've seen pretty much everything in that story. I mean, it was just a dream that I had, an accumulation of things that I've already seen. No, I have a much more interesting story idea. What I want to know is, what happens next? What happens to the most powerful player in a game when they're suddenly back in real life? What happens when you go from an indestructible death machine to a fragile human being with no physical skills? What happens when the person you've loved for decades suddenly becomes a stranger whose only connection to you was in a 2-day game? What happens when you look in the mirror every morning and see food? I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm more interested in the aftermath. There we go, roll credits. No, but seriously, I was trying to develop this story and started to realize I was much more interested in what happened to Alpha after the game than during the game. No one's really done that on a large scale before, that I know of. So I did. Well, I mean, I didn't actually do it because if I did, you'd be reading a comic or something and not watching a video called Scrap Storylines. Anyway, so here's my aftermath. The main story actually takes place 2 years after the fateful 28-hour game. But before we get to that, let's meet our main character. Enter Irene Winters, a reserved girl with little interest in other people. She's a middle child, having an older brother and a little sister, and never got much attention from her parents. Her family was not insanely rich, but her father was a manager at the factory where 90% of the town worked. So the family was better off than most people in the dying town, but not as rich as the owners at the factory. Irene loved video games and programming, with a special interest in satires and horror. Not horror in your stereotypical creepypasta fangirl that wants to be a serial killer when they're older and super edgy. No, more like people look at her and they're like, "Oh, you like horror? But you're so timid," sort of way. So when Zombie Plus was announced, Irene was interested. She wasn't a huge zombie fanatic, but she liked the genre. Besides, it was the only game coming out for the new VD system that was even slightly in the horror genre. I doubt that past me, but okay. Irene was able to pre-order the game, so she was able to play it on launch day. She was there at 10 p.m. It was 8 p.m. for her in Colorado. She was able to survive in the first few rounds, making her way across the map to get away from most players, and lived in small groups of 5 or 6. She was feeling pretty confident about being able to survive the 8 years, and wasn't that worried about the logout feature being broken, thinking they would all be logged out automatically at 6 a.m. Irene and her group didn't actually find out about the first Zombie Plus until year 5. Queen Bea was mostly attacking the human settlements around the start zone, where most players still resided, so she wasn't really a threat to Irene and the others who lived at the edge of the map. Eventually they killed Queen Bea, and Irene thought that was the end of it. But a couple months after Bea died, Irene and her friends found themselves surrounded by a horde of zombies. They'd been careless, firing off several flares as pseudo-fireworks to celebrate the marriage of 2 players. Aw, that's kinda cute. After Zombie Plus, regular zombies hardly seemed like a problem, but the zombies were still out there, and they swarmed to the area where they shot off the flares. Irene watched her friends get eaten by zombies. She managed to grab a bomb and found an abandoned house filled with gunpowder, no doubt a programmed gunpowder stash. She gathered all the gunpowder and threw it on the ground, calling for the zombies to come after her. She waited until there was as many zombies as possible around before setting off the bomb. There was a major explosion, killing hundreds of zombies. Since Irene was at the center of the explosion, she should have died as well. But she didn't die. Instead, she got an achievement. Zombie Plus, the notification read. Suddenly, she was taken back to the character customization screen. Her face and body were the same, but now she had dark purple skin and her hair was white. She wasn't allowed to change it either. The only thing she was allowed to change was her username and a new feature that wasn't there previously. There was a panel of shapes and colors. The buttons for the rhombus shape. Oh yeah, rhombus, that's what it's called. Button for the rhombus shape was dark and nothing happened when Irene tried to select it. Same for the color yellow. So Irene selected the circle button and chose her favorite color, green, the color of her eyes. I hope y'all can see where I'm going with this. Yes, Irene is Alpha. Figuring out what was going on, she chooses the name Alpha. As soon as she hit the check mark, she came back into the world in the same spot that she lit the bomb. But all her stats were much higher, and her HP had been turned into a new slider called Energy. She made quick work to turn some humans into Zombie Plus, finding it a bit eerie that they were so loyal to her, but that didn't bother her for too long. The rest of the game played out as I explained earlier, with her meeting Master and eventually ruling the world with him. But then the game ended and Irene woke up. Cue the hospital scene with one of the previous slaves attacking her and one of the previous Zombie Plus protecting her. They still had the eerie loyalty to her, having spent nearly 30 years in that mindset. Her parents were notified and came to the hospital to find that their daughter, Irene, had gone from glasses-wearing gamer girl to majestic manipulative monster almost overnight. Literally. Needless to say, they were pretty horrified. The company that made Zombie Plus was sued. They were canceled, y'all. And many people tried to take Irene and the other Zombie Plus to court. This lasted for a headache-inducing amount of time, causing the Winters family a lot of trouble. But it was eventually ruled that the players' actions in-game were the result of the game programming, and they couldn't be held responsible. So Irene and the other Zombie Plus were off the hook. Irene's parents managed to keep her out of the public's eye, relying on the rich friends, the ones that owned the factory, for support. As a result of this, Irene wasn't about to reconnect with Master once they woke up. Her family couldn't understand why she would even want to. No one else in their small town had been in the 48-hour game, so no one really understood what was happening to Irene. Her parents put her in therapy after she complained about needing to break someone's neck and wanting to drink blood vodka. Her father would say, "Don't you mean a Bloody Mary?" And Irene would reply, "No, blood vodka. You mix blood with vodka. It's absolute perfection, and I pity the weaklings who have never had the chance to taste it." We stan. So long story short, Irene had some trouble getting reintegrated into human society. Anyways, main story, that's right. We haven't actually gotten to that yet. Luckily, it's not too complicated. It's mostly just an explanation of what it's like for Irene to go from human-eating, indestructible zombie that's lived for 64 years and is well-versed at strategy and ruling a nation to its 18-year-old with no real power or talents to speak of. So, it's been 2 years since the game ended. The world has long since moved on from the Zombie Plus apocalypse, but those who lived through it are still affected. Irene is doing therapy and volunteering at a local nursery. She likes it because the kids treat her like someone who has to be listened to, which she appreciates. She stops by McDonald's, please don't sue me, because the coffee there has the similar strange sweetness that she's come to associate with blood. That's when she meets the newest employee. Apparently, the new guy's the little brother of the manager's girlfriend and was down on his luck. The manager offered him a job and he moved here to take it. But that wasn't important to Irene, because as soon as she sees him, she instantly recognizes him and he recognizes her. It's Master, the man she was married to for 28 years. At first, neither of them knew what to do. They just stared at each other in disbelief. But then, overwhelmed with emotion, they embraced. Luckily, McDonald's is pretty empty at 3 p.m., so no one was allowed to see them cry for happiness in each other's arms. They found each other again. They had each other again. For the first time in 2 years, Irene had someone who knew what she was going through. The manager saw them hugging and asked them what was going on. Master told him that he'd just been reunited with his internet wife and to have a little pity in the narcissistic tone that Irene had come to love. Irene was a bit surprised that his accent was different. "You're not British?" she asked as she punched him in the shoulder. "Honestly, sweetheart, you should have figured that out a lot sooner," Master laughed, rubbing his shoulder. Master reintroduced himself as Derek Payne. Irene told him that her real name was Irene Winters. The two of them left McDonald's after Derek's sister's boyfriend, aka the manager, gave them the go-ahead, and they talked about what had happened to them over the last 2 years. Derek had dyed his hair white a couple months after the game was over because he couldn't stand looking at himself and feeling so wrong. Irene admitted to have drawing on her skin with a purple Sharpie whenever she felt bad. Apparently, Derek came from a really poor family. After his parents found out what happened and what their son had done, the monster that Derek had turned into, they completely disowned him. He found himself in the spotlight for the world's hate, after the mysterious Alpha was nowhere to be found. Thea got out of the game hours before the rest, so the programmers already knew about her reign as Zombie Queen. But after they found out the extent that Derek and Alpha had gone to, even they were repulsed. Derek had nothing. No money, no home, no friends. The world hated him, and he had no one to turn to. At first, he was angry. How dare they? How dare they look down upon him as if he was some mere mortal? How dare they treat him like a rat when they should fear him like the worthless food that they were? But his complex would get him nowhere in this world. Had he truly been the 19-year-old kid the world was trying to tell him he was, he probably never would have survived. But no, he was Master, ruler of the most powerful race the world had ever seen. He could tackle any problem. He was going to live on his own and flourish. AKA he moved in with his sister. His sister was a college dropout, but she had her own rundown apartment and a relatively steady job at a call center. Derek tried to get a job, but it was a little hard since no one wanted to hire the infamous Master. He needed to find a place where no one really knew who he was, where he could live without fearing that someone was going to recognize him, and either declare their undying loyalty to him or try to kill him. Eventually, his sister told him that she simply couldn't afford to keep looking after him. She told him that her boyfriend lived in a small town and ran the local McDonald's, and the rest is history. Basically, the actual story would be the romance between Derek and Irene. It would ask questions about morality in video games and the legitimacy of in-game relationships. Derek and Irene would meet Bia eventually, who was actually a crippled girl from an insanely rich family in Asia who got their hands on the game before it was released worldwide just for Bian Lava, I can't pronounce her name, which is Bia's real name, to play. They also met Prince, who was a 14-year-old kid with anxiety issues named Timothy Dreech. They encountered problems with people who played the game with them, and family members of people whose lives were ruined by the game. Basically, all that background was just to set up this playground for me to mess around with these concepts. But as is with most things, I eventually got tired of the story, hence why it's now in a video called Scrap Storylines. And that's all I really have to say about it. There was an actual story that followed Irene and Derek as they reconnected and eventually got married in real life. It was a cute story, but again, I just kind of grew bored of it. Anyways, that's all I got. Let me know if you like these sort of videos. I have a lot of Scrap Storylines, so I might make a series if enough of y'all are interested. I probably won't try to do the whole Animatic thing again, but I could definitely throw together a couple of speed paints. I think that's all, so I guess I'll see y'all in the next video. Bye! Sorry, I named this girl Winters after this guy that used to go to my work, and like thinking back, he was definitely 500% a drug dealer. Like, wow. Like, wow, he really was a drug dealer. Huh. That's Seaside's point.